Hello. So this is the final week of class. You are doing fantastic work. Your projects are so interesting and unique. And before I go into this review of the class, I want to go back to a reading that you did in week 1. Let's go back to Parker Palmer's Courage to Teach. And you might remember that what Palmer said was, good teachers join self, subject, and students in the fabric of life because they teach from an integral and undivided self. They manifest their own lives and evoke in their students a capacity for connectedness. They are able to weave a complex web of connections between themselves, their subjects, and their students, so that students can learn to weave a world for themselves. The methods used by these weavers vary widely. Lectures, Socratic dialogues, laboratory experiments, collaborative problem solving, creative chaos. The connections made by good teachers are held not in their methods, but in their hearts, meaning heart in its ancient sense, the place where intellect and emotion and spirit will converge in the human self. I wanted to start with the Palmer quote because in the past 9.5 weeks, you've really delved into the architecture in a way of how to design instruction, how to think about creating a solid experience that will suit your learners, suit your topic, draw on appropriate strategies. And in a way, this is like building a house, right? Where you want it to be structurally sound, you want the rain not to come in. And yet it's different from a home. And who you are as a teacher and the heart that you bring to it will clearly be what also animates your instruction. And you need both these things to come together. Also, the reason I wanted to refer back to the Parker Palmer quote is because he really makes explicit that there are so many different ways that you can excel, even in your instructional design. So some of you are using more instructivist approaches, some of you are using more connectivist or constructivist approaches, and some of you are drawing on social learning, some of you are drawing on more cognitive learning. All of that is all good, and it all depends on who you are, who your learners are, what your context is. And that although I chose a certain way to teach this class, I'm using design thinking ADDIE. This class has been largely constructivist in its approach. And I would say connectivist as well, not instructivist though. Although I've chosen certain ways for given the context we're in, given who you are, given who I am, that I think it's just so great that each of you are going in your own direction and that there's not just one way to create great instruction. In short, I hope that each of you are, in terms of designing your learning experience, are not only designing something that is solid and that works and is logical and makes sense, but also something that is your home, that can be an expression of the kind of instruction that you most want to provide. Let's start reviewing some of what we learned in the past 9.5 weeks. And this course is about instructional design, and it's also about learning theory. So let's start with the part that's about design. So much of what we were doing was really developing a vocabulary so we could talk about design. So for example, we started with language like diverge and converge, and we talked about the groan zone, that space when you're not sure, where you're getting frustrated with diverging and you're not sure if you should start converging, and about how different people have different tolerances for how long they will diverge and when they will converge. And so in terms of developing a vocabulary, just thinking in terms of diverge and converge allows you to communicate with others about how much time you need to explore ideas versus how much time you need to then hone those ideas, choose between them, and select the best ones. We looked at two theories of instructional design. One, design thinking, and two is ADDIE. So design thinking was the one that I introduced you to, in the sense that I brought in that IDEO video where they talked about the deep dive, and they went out to the four corners of the earth, explored what was needed for a better shopping cart, came in, diverged around what the criteria were for success, what would make a good shopping cart, prototype different ideas until they came to a final design. And those are the steps that we went through, in the sense that you dove deeply into your topic, your learners, you did the persona, and that according to the empathy stage. And your context. So I broadened the definition of empathy so that it's all encompassing. You then defined, and this is the part that I've been pushing a lot of you on. So you go out and do the personas, but I've been pushing you on, okay, what exactly are your insights from those personas that inform that design? Then you ideated, you come up with all different ways that you can meet all the needs that you have now discovered in the first stage. Prototype. In our class, we did the prototyping through storyboarding, although there are many ways, as you pointed out, that you could do it in real life. And then the testing would be the next step, the implementation stage, where you actually put it out, where you're no longer just putting it out there to learn, but you're actually trying it out, hoping that you've gotten many elements right. So design thinking is what I layered on for you to engage in the instructional design process, but we definitely also engaged in ADDIE, because that was what your textbook outlined step by step. So in the analysis stage of ADDIE, you were figuring out who are your learners, what is your context, what are your outcomes, what are you doing, what is your topic. Then you went on to design, and so design would be like the ideate stage of design thinking, because you've already now gotten to know the situation, you've defined what it is, you're coming up with ideas, then you develop. And design thinking develops through prototyping, but you can be developing your curriculum and honing it also through the ADDIE process, through the ways shown in your textbook. Prototyping is one way to develop, and then you would implement it. So we've engaged in these two processes, which give you a language through which to see the design process and make sure that you're thorough and rigorous in going through it. As I've talked about many times in the class, the whole point of this class was, when you're designing, to think about your learners, your topic, your context, through that to be choosing the right strategies and activities. And we looked at some frameworks for organizing lessons and organizing your strategies, like Gagne's framework. Of course, along with design, we learned theory. And this was mostly in week 2, where we read about Freire, we read about experiential learning and Kolb, and we read about transformative learning theory and Mesereau. And then there were other theories in your textbook. For example, some of you drew on Bandura and self-efficacy. Some of you drew on Piaget. So there were other theories you were exposed to in the readings, but I chose to make 3 theories the center point. Now, of course, in these final weeks, it's up to you to go out and seek the learning theories and the theoretical grounding that will best suit your topic and what you're particularly interested in. And of course, we also talked about indigenization, and Asma came in and also is making herself available if anyone wants to follow up, because as educators, we are all going to be called upon to participate in indigenization efforts from now into the future, for now and evermore. So we had this theoretical background. And what I want to talk about briefly is something that I posted in the discussion forum around precisely what this should mean to you as you're thinking about bringing together theory and practice, and as you're thinking about your final assignment. So in this discussion forum post, what I tried to make clear was how thinking about theory will impact your design. And to start, it's important to recognize that there's a difference between cognitive theories and social theories. Cognitive theories are about giving people the information with the assumption that if the information is in people's brains, that is how they learn. Whereas social theories would say that actually, if I might become an avid recycler simply by being within a social group where I observe those behaviors, I become socialized into it, and it's not actually about the cognitive aspects of what information I know about recycling. And of course, most of us bridge those two in some way. Most of us draw on learning theory and social learning and cognitive learning when we're trying to design learning experiences. That said, I urge you to take this seriously as you're designing your lesson plans, or some of you it's a workplace experience or or a community event, whatever it is. So by take it seriously, what I mean is when you're thinking about think about the social groups that people come from and how this might lead them to interact differently with whatever is going on in your learning experience, and think of the social group that is formed within the activity itself. So for example, this would be especially true for people who aren't just doing a one-off workshop. So this came up very much in Shelby's lesson, where she's dealing with high school students who, as she pointed out through her personas, care about social status. So there you're looking and saying, okay, how can I leverage social learning, the fact that they will be influenced by this social environment, in order to promote the outcomes I want to promote. So then, of course, connectivism would come in and say, well, you know what? It's not actually in your head or in the social group alone. It's in your head, in the social group, and on the computer. And consider how that would change how you would actually design a lesson. That you might not spend as much time having people learn. You might say they will always have access to this information, how you might not spend as much time on how they would learn actually facts and data or information. You would assume an interaction through social media with other people and an interaction with a device. So my point here is that theory and practice is connected, and in your assignment, please consider how you're drawing on theory. The final slide I wanted to share as a reminder of the lesson of the course as a whole is about creative constraints, and that imagination is unleashed by constraints. You break out of the box by stepping into shackles. And what you'll notice is in the assignments, I often give feedback about precision. I'll say dig deeper, be more precise. I use that word, precision, a lot. And because it's easy in a way to think of big ideas, but it's when you get down to the specifics of who is in the room. Let's not romanticize them. Let's not imagine that everybody will just be fascinated because, you know, because they're being exposed to a certain activity. Let's look at real people and when they get happy, when they get grumpy, what's engaging to them, and let's get then very specific about how we can help guide people through learning. That doesn't mean becoming a robot and scripting every step, and we saw some great examples in your learning challenges of more fluid learning plans, and that's great, but it does mean having some intention around who you're designing for and how you're designing. I think that's a wrap. So you have done fantastic work. As many of you have noted, doing this kind of work in an online course has its challenges. Of course, there's different ways of interacting than you would face-to-face. And there's some advantages, and those advantages are, for example, that you have time to work through the exercise, and there are disadvantages. You don't have that same ability to just sort something out on the spot when things are unclear. Somebody, I think it may have been Natalie, pointed out how converging can be difficult because diverging goes on for such a long time. But you've risen to the challenge and you've done great work. So thank you. It's been a true honor and pleasure to be your instructor. I am always at the other end of the computer. If anything you're doing in this class ends up being something you take forward and want to continue honing, I actually really love this. It's not just my job, and so I'm always around to if I can be of any help at all. I look forward to reading your final designs, and I will be on and off email this weekend if you have questions before you submit your final paper. Thank you.